Today, I have a very special episode for you. World renowned expert in psychological safety, Amy Edmondson, is joining me on the Happier at Work podcast. And we talk all things psychological safety. So, very practically speaking, what does this look like? How does this show up? Why is it important? And what can leaders do straight away to check whether they have psychological safety and to build psychological safety within their teams? So, I know you're really going to enjoy today's episode. For me, psychological safety and getting it right is foundational. It forms the foundation of my thriving talent model. Today's episode is so full of wisdom and insights. I know you're absolutely going to love it. I would love if you get involved in the conversation. Let me know what you thought, what challenges you have in relation to psychological safety, and let me know what you think of today's episode. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so you will find me there. And if you want to reach out directly, you can get me on podcast at happieratwork.ie. Amy Edmondson, you're so welcome to the Happier at Work podcast. I know we had a very brief meeting in Paris that kind of resulted in this conversation today, but I'm so delighted to have you on the podcast. For the people who haven't heard about you or your work previously, do you want to do a brief introduction about what you do and how you got into it and what's interesting about it?
Yes. Well, first of all, let me just say thank you for including me in the podcast. It's a great topic, and I'm really happy to be here with you. So I'm a professor at Harvard Business School. I've been here for almost 30 years, and I study, I think the simplest way to put this is that I study organizational learning. Some years ago, I became absolutely fascinated by the problem of how do organizations keep learning, adapting, innovating as they must to stay relevant in a changing world. And I wanted to study that. So I went back to do a PhD to sort of see if I could study that. And of course, along the way, I realized you can't, it's not easy to study that it's too big. And so I ended up studying, I had this insight that organizations learn, it's a very abstract idea, right? Organizations learn when their teams learn. Now, suddenly that's a little more concrete. So
Yeah.
a team could be the top management team. They have to rethink the strategy. A team could be a marketing team that's trying to understand customers' needs. A team could be a production team in the factory. All those teams matter. And the work each and every one of those teams does contributes to the success of the enterprise. But if those teams aren't learning, aren't finding ways to do what they do better, aren't solving problems, aren't innovating, then the organization will be at trouble. So then I said, okay, now what I have to do is really study what is it that allows teams to work, teams to learn. And that became the kind of narrower playing field that I've been in for, the last 3 decades.
And would you say that it's looking at it from a couple of different perspectives? I know Edgar Schein used to talk about this idea of process inquiry. So it's looking at it from how we work together, not just what we're learning.
Yes, and in fact, I mean, the part of the original puzzle for me was that, how do organizations learn? Well, first of all, they're most of the time the evidence suggests they don't do a good job of learning.
Okay.
And we say, but it's very human to learn. Human beings are good at learning. And we quickly recognize that the learning of an individual doesn't spontaneously translate into the better action of the organization. And similarly for teams. So individuals are learning things all the time. Oftentimes they're learning the wrong things, but they're learning things all the time. The processes, by which we really mean conversations and interactions in a team, are what allow the individual learning or insights or discoveries to translate into better output by the team. So it's all about process. And increasingly, and following on some of my mentors' work, Ed Schein, Chris Argyris, increasingly, I think we have to zoom in on conversation. We're having a
Okay.
conversation right here, but
Yeah.
conversation is really where team learning happens, right? I might be very quietly learning on my own, in my own, at my own desk, but for us to learn, we have to talk. Now, that talking could be through electronic, communication, through email, through Slack, but we have to use words to connect with each other and
Mm.
build our understanding. And so those conversations can happen in either lower quality or higher quality forms.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess my definition of higher quality is virtually the same as learning. It's like if we're genuinely learning from each other and from the process and from the work, then that I would call that a high quality conversation.
Yeah. And you talked about that in Paris, like the idea of having a high quality conversation. And what I'm taking from what you're saying now is the idea that we're tapping into the learning of what's in other people's heads by having these high quality conversations. So
Yeah,
one thing that kind of
yeah.
that I remember is the leader says something and everyone just nods or stays silent or says yes. And it's
Right.
like,
Yes,
that's not
boss.
a
Yeah.
high quality
No,
conversation. It's
no.
about challenging and tapping into
Right.
what people have in their heads as to why it might not be a good idea.
That's right. And that is such a fundamental insight, right? It's really one of the oldest findings in our field of organizational studies, which is that people don't like to disagree with the boss, and
Mm,
that, if they have something that they understand to be a dissenting view, it's far more likely that they'll hold back than share it. Because
mm,
that feeling of, well, the leader shapes my career and my outcomes, and I need to make the leader happy, which of course is wrong-headed. What we need to help the leader learn, or else we're all in trouble down
yeah,
down
yeah.
down the line. So it's a funny cartoon that I showed in Paris and elsewhere, which is where people are holding back their truthful view of the decision that's being made and just saying yes,
Mm,
yes, great idea, sir, right? And instead of saying that won't work because, right? Or here's some concerns I have about that, or here's what customers are saying. So, you know, uh, organizations are in trouble when we are left to our own sort of spontaneous psychological devices.
mm,
It's far easier to go along and to agree than to disagree, and you want to be liked and all the rest.
yeah.
So it's I guess you could say it this way, that most organizations today, really all organizations, are doing knowledge work, and that means they're employing knowledge workers. And if those knowledge workers aren't willing to share their knowledge, the organization is in trouble.
Yeah.
So that is why, in my interest in how organizations learn, and my idea that we should really look at how teams learn in order to understand how organizations learn, I very quickly found myself with the following sort of focus or observation, which is that because people are likely to hold back the truth, we need to figure out how to create the conditions where people will share, will lean in, will take interpersonal risks, will
Mm,
speak up with the truth, will share crazy ideas, will ask for help when they're in over their head, will admit mistakes. And none of those things I just said are easy for us
mm, yeah.
fallible human beings. None of them are fun, really. Maybe sharing ideas can be a little bit fun, but not if we think someone's going to laugh at us. And so uh, uh, later, I gave that experience where you can speak up honestly, even though it's not easy, as called it psychological safety, right? And it's not psychological safety doesn't describe an environment where we're comfortable, right? It
Mm,
describes an environment where we're candid. And not because it's fun or easy to be candid, but because we so passionately care about each other and about the team's work, or maybe about the customers or the patients or whoever it is we're serving, that we're willing to be uncomfortable in order to do a good job. And I don't think you can do knowledge work well without being uncomfortable.
mm. Yeah. And I know you talk about some of the things that get in the way. And I suppose for me, it's interesting to look at it from a couple of different perspectives. So, from the perspective of the boss, if everyone's agreeing with him, you're like, oh, that's
Right.
brilliant. My ideas are great. And
Exactly.
I don't want anyone to
Exactly.
knock me down and to pick apart my ideas. And then from an individual perspective, like you say, you want to keep the boss happy. So you don't want
Right.
to make them uncomfortable or you don't want to say bad things about their idea.
Right, so the deck is stacked against us being
Mm,
effective, right? Because
yep.
the things that are comfortable and enjoyable are the things that don't get us where we need to go in terms of excellence, right? So, yeah, I mean, not only is the boss and any one of us, right? It's not we're not picking on anyone. Any one of
Yeah.
us is happier when people agree with us, when people say,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's brilliant." I love it when someone says, "Oh, that's a brilliant idea." I mean, you can't help it. You smile, right?
Yeah.
And so in a way, the challenge is for all of us, self-leadership, self-management is about learning to equate that agreement with risk. Like, ooh, wait a
Yes.
minute. That might not be okay, right? What are the odds that I have only brilliant ideas? Pretty low. So, learning to just be a little more vigilant, a little more wary,
Mm,
and a little more curious, right? I like to say there's a way in which you can make this somewhat selfish. Like you can say, okay, I know I enjoy being agreed with, but I'm almost certainly missing some part of this puzzle. And selfishly, I would like to know. Like I would like to know what's in your head, right? So I'm going to just pause and remind myself that actually I'm better off knowing what's really going on.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. That you should see that. Well, that's actually something bad when people are not
Right,
speaking up, when they're not
right, right.
challenging what's going on. One of the roles I always enjoyed playing when I was working in big teams was the devil's advocate. I loved that role just so I could kind
Yeah,
of have
because it's a
license
role,
to. It is.
right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
being yourself and sort of being the one who's always disagreeing, that's not so enjoyable unless you get a
Mm,
particular kick out of it. But if someone has said, please be the devil's advocate for me
yeah.
today, you've been tasked with this wonderful creative job. I mean, you might not even believe what you're saying, but you're just like, let me just raise this as a concern. Let me raise
Yeah.
that as a concern. What you're doing is, kicking the tires. You're trying to make sure the vehicle's okay before we go out on the road with it.
This is it. So we've talked about this idea in kind of a roundabout way of impression management, which I think
Yeah.
it's such an interesting concept. What are the other things that you see that get in the way of us being able to create this environment of learning?
Well, I mean, it's in a way the biggest impediment to an environment of learning is our taken for granted mental models
Hmm.
of knowing. And so
Okay.
it's,
Yes. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's hard to learn if you already know. And
Hmm.
like it or not, we all have a kind of spontaneous experience of knowing. Like I know I don't know everything about, whatever higher order mathematics or physics, right? But as I look around and I see you on the screen and I look around my office, I mean I have this very strong sense that I'm seeing reality. I'm
Hmm.
not, right?
Hmm.
I'm seeing reality filtered through my expertise, my experience, maybe even my mood, right? So it's it's learning to actively choose learning over knowing, right? Because knowing is the default. But if I can, especially in moments that matter, right? I don't have to do this. What should I have for lunch today? Who cares, right? But if I say, here we are making an important decision or caring for a patient or, giving someone developmental feedback, in that moment, I have to pause and actively choose to be a learner, right? Because a learner will, once I choose that part of me, and we all have that part,
Hmm.
then I will proactively ask questions. I'll ask good questions. I'll ask the kinds of questions that you ask when you genuinely want to find out something new,
Hmm.
as
Yeah.
opposed to the kind of question when you want to say, "Hey, I'm right, right?" You know, that doesn't that doesn't teach me anything, right? It just
Yeah. There's something coming to me in relation to imposter syndrome or feeling like we should have all of the answers. And
Yes,
that's getting in the way of us asking questions. We need to be the expert. We need to know everything already. And, I talk all the time about leaders of how they don't need to have all the answers, and they can ask questions if they don't know the answer. You can coach someone, you can put the question back on someone else and have them figure things out for themselves. But as us as individuals, when we're faced with that idea of being the beginner mindset, or
yes,
switching to curiosity rather than feeling
yeah.
like we have to have the answers, it's hard.
It is hard. And it's funny because there was a time, let's call it, industrial era, mid-industrial era, where leaders, it was probably accurate and okay for them to have all the answers. But in the digital era, in the knowledge era, not only can you not have all the answers, but you're sort of foolish if you're someone who thinks you do, right?
Mm.
The script has literally flipped so that the people, and we all know them, right? The people who can never be wrong, who have all the answers, who are trying to embody a command and control style, um, are not admirable anymore. They may sometimes be under the illusion that they are, but we can all see through that. And
Mm.
so it's more than just you don't have to have all the answers. It's like if you think you have all the answers, you're in trouble. So
Okay,
catch and
yeah, yeah,
correct,
it's
right?
more
Like really,
extreme. Yeah.
right? It's more extreme. It's like really pause and go, uh-oh, I was just falling into the trap of thinking I had all the answers or I had to have all the answers. And boy, is that wrong. And I love the connection you made to imposter syndrome. I hadn't really connected those two things, but I think, many high achievers, so many leaders have some degree of imposter syndrome. Certainly, I have a lot of imposter syndrome myself. So it is um, it is a kind of dis-ease that
Mm.
leads you to do things that are not in your best interest, to posture, to show off, to fail to ask good questions, to not admit mistakes, to not ask for help. And yet,
Mm.
um, the people who are really the real thing in any profession or leadership role are the ones who are curious, right?
Yeah.
Are the ones who are so one of the best ways to sort of overcome the imposter syndrome, don't beat yourself up for having it, but overcome it is to kind of go, wait a minute, right? I'm not only allowed to ask questions, I'm supposed to, right? That's
Mm.
that's actually what strong leaders and good professionals and great team members do.
Yeah, yeah. I think it ties back in with what we were talking about a second ago, this idea of impression management. And I've created this illusion about myself that I'm the expert and I know, I have all the answers. And
Yeah.
I need to maintain that illusion for other people by
That's,
managing their
yeah.
impression of me.
Three incredibly powerful words to hear from a leader are I don't know.
Mm.
Right? It's just, it's like it's attention getting and it's like, oh, right, of course, of of course you don't about, you don't know, oh, I'll find out or I'm interested to learn more about that, right? It's
Yeah.
just I don't know, followed quickly by I was wrong, right? These are all statements of strength
Mm.
that many people erroneously see as statements of weakness.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a brilliant reframe.
Yeah.
Are there anything, if you're thinking, I'm thinking on a day-to-day basis, I'm in the office or I'm having, I'm working from home or I'm having Zoom meetings. We kind of talked about this idea of awareness and noticing where you want to be
Mm.
right or where you
Mm.
want to have all the answers. Are there any things that leaders can do practically to try and build the conditions that enable psychological safety?
I think there are. And I think they start with reminding, and I love the word remind because it's put it
Yeah.
back front and center, reminding the team or the town hall of the true nature of the work we do, right? It's
Mm,
some combination or piece of the following. It's uncertain, right? It's interdependent, it's challenging, or it's novel, right? It might be all of those things, but as soon as you really pause to become aware that what lies ahead is uncertain, interdependent, complex, challenging, suddenly it's obvious, right? It's logically obvious that everyone's voice could matter, right? That anyone at any given time might have the game-winning idea, might be able to spot the concern that could have turned into a large and preventable failure, right? Because, if we're doing work, and I think the default mental model is that the work that lies ahead is execution, right? It's get through the agenda. It's hit your targets. One of the most destructive phrases I think that's still out there. But
Yeah.
that's actually not, the work that lies ahead is problem solving. And problem solving is nearly always enhanced by teamwork and several heads are better than one and all the rest. So it's kind of just call it. So step number one or idea number one is call attention to the nature of the work because that helps people see that yes, their voice is needed if we're going to do it well.
Mm.
Number two, proactive inquiry. Just spend a great deal more of your time as a leader than is normal and natural asking good questions. And a good
Mm.
question is one that draws out the relevant knowledge of others. So it might be, what are customers saying about this? It might be,
Mm.
who has a different perspective? It might be, what are competitors doing, right? And any one of those questions is a kind of question that reaches out and says, help us fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
Or the kind that says, okay, that sounds like a great idea. Walk me through it, right? The kind that
Yeah.
says, go deeper, please give me more of your thinking so
Mm.
that I can learn. Now, the beauty of a good question is you don't have to say, oh, let's have psychological safety, blah, 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 right? All you have to do is ask a question. You've been doing it. You ask me a question. I promise you, it would be nearly impossible for me to sit here quietly after you ask me a question, especially after you use my name, right? So it's awkward.
Yeah.
So whereas the default is it's awkward to speak up when you're not, when you're
Mm.
lower in the hierarchy, it's sort of, is it okay if I say something now? But if someone asks you a question, it's mighty awkward not to respond. Right? So the leader's most important tool in the toolkit is inquiry. It's
Mm.
asking good questions.
Yeah.
And finally, and this is obvious, what leaders can do more of to create candor, psychological safety is to monitor their reactions, right? Let's say
Mm.
someone does disagree with you. What is your face doing? Is it annoyed? Is it frustrated? Is it curious? Is it grateful? Is it, oh, I hadn't thought of that, right? Thank you so much. I mean, you don't have to get carried away. Be honest, be sincere, but it's naturally hard for people to take interpersonal risks, especially in a hierarchy.
Mm.
And so just making that a slightly more positive experience rather than a necessarily inherently negative experience goes a long way. So
Mm.
someone raises a different idea and you say, I don't think that's going to work, but I'm so glad you brought it up. Great, right? You
Yeah.
just got to value each other the way some ways we do this, if you're ever teaching little children, you sort of and I don't mean be infantilizing of your
Mm.
colleagues, but
Yeah.
there's something we know how to naturally do when we know that the other person is a learner, is supposed to be a learner. Like if you're
Mm.
teaching a group of first graders, you tell them, you explain things thoughtfully and you ask good questions and you try to draw them out, right? And we should do that of each other, not from a, teacher student perspective, but from a human to human perspective. Like, why
Yeah.
are we not drawing forth the wisdom of each other?
Yeah. And why do you think that is, turning this question back on
Well,
you?
let's go back
What's
to
got in the
imposter
way?
syndrome, hierarchy,
Yeah.
that sort of erroneous belief that I'm supposed to know,
Mm.
rather than supposed to wonder or create or problem solve.
Mm.
I think we just have faulty mental models.
Yeah. And do you think
Um,
organizations and the systems that we're working in, they kind of reinforce these beliefs
yeah.
that we have?
They do. And
Mm.
and I mentioned earlier, hit your targets. Like that doesn't sound to most people like a radical statement, but it is a little bit of a radical statement because if you
Mm.
genuinely understand that the future is quite uncertain and never has been more so, um, the only targets that you can reliably hit. So if the organization says you must hit your targets, the only targets you could reliably hit are the very low ones, right? Think about it. It's
Mm,
just so the instruction from that cultural meme is lowball it, right? It's not aim high,
yeah.
learn fast, team up. It's, set them at a level where they can be reached, which means they're essentially things you've done before, you know how to do,
Uh,
they're not
yeah.
not as ambitious as they would
Yeah.
otherwise be. And that kind of logic made perfect sense in the industrial era, right? Because you
Mm,
had a clear line of sight on the future. And it makes sense. I don't want to get carried away. It makes sense in manufacturing environments where we do, in fact, know what the cycle time is of each task, and we know how long the throughput time is of getting that vehicle off the line, and we can count on it. Like we can
mm,
literally stand there with our stopwatch and know that it will work. But force yourself to step back and think like how much of the work that we, meaning the organization,
yeah.
does
Yeah.
is highly routine and consistent.
Mm,
How much of it is well understood but variable, and how much of it is brand new. We've never done that before, right? We're going to be trial and failure, right? So, and then once you've forced yourself to think about it that way, then say, well, what are the different operating modes I would need to achieve excellence in all three domains? And you'd realize
mm,
it's not exactly the same. I mean,
yeah.
they're all about learning because the,
Yeah.
the consistent domain is about continuous improvement, Kaizen. Right? The variable domain is about using our knowledge and skill to solve problems that some of which we've seen before, some of which we haven't. And then, the other is the innovation, the sort of what will next year's products look like, or
Mm.
10 years from now, depending on the industry you're in.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's interesting. And I did want to come back to that idea of hitting targets because I know you've spoken before about how it creates competition between people, especially if they're individual level targets. And that
Yeah.
can kind of erode this sense of psychological safety and learning
Yeah.
if people as individuals are just out for themselves.
This is a tricky one, because I think we don't want competition will never go away, and maybe we don't even want to, but we do want to be honest and open about it. Like, let's
Mm,
say, a professional basketball team. Let's say a
yeah.
very good professional basketball team. I promise you, the players feel competitive with each other.
Mm,
Each of them would love to have their stats be the top of the team, right? And they also understand we will not win any games if we're not incredibly cooperative with each other.
yeah.
So they
Mm,
manage that tension. And I think the great teams, both in sports and in work, manage it aloud, right? We're open, like we all, of course, we're all high achievers. We want to compete. We kind of want to be the best sometimes.
yeah.
But we also are smart enough to know where that instinct will get us in trouble and get our team in trouble.
Mm,
And so if we can own both, like I want to be good, I want to compete, but I also want our team to win. And so I don't want to do anything that's going to get in the way of our team winning because that's going to reflect badly on me, right? And
yeah.
again, to sports, if I'm if I'm like getting the best stats of all of the entire league, but my team never wins a game, no other team is going to hire me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So it's you've got to realize that duality and make it discussable and figure out how do we make our healthy competitive instincts
Mm,
not end up harming us.
mm. I think that's a really great reframe because we do tend to be competitive at work, and it.
Yeah.
I did wonder how do we resolve
Yeah.
that kind of conflict of I'm quite competitive, I'm high achieving, I want to be the best, but I
Yeah.
actually for the success of my team I need to collaborate with other people for the best outcomes.
I think it's sometimes things like that. I mean, you and I, we're human beings. We're talking to each other. We both know this, and it's not because we're in on some secret. Everybody knows this, right? So the funny part really is that it's not discussable most of the
Mm,
time. And
yeah,
I think, why not, right? I say,
yeah,
why not? Why don't we say, let's talk about this stuff?
mm, yeah,
Because once it's out in the open, it's less damaging,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
This
it's a little bit fun. It's
well this
funny. right? We humans are funny,
Because we
right?
don't talk about this stuff. It's
Yeah,
like
I mean, we're funny
we
because
all
like
know
a
it, but
lot
we
of
just don't say
our
it.
desires are, some of our desires are helpful to the team. Some of them are counterproductive, but we're not unique, right?
Mm,
We're all climbing the same mountain
yeah,
together to sort of become more self-aware, to become more caring,
yeah.
inclusive, ambitious for us rather than just for me. Like the best kind of accomplishment is the accomplishment we do as a team
Mm,
that none of us could have done on our own,
yeah,
right? The
yeah.
things I have to do on my own, I have to write a paragraph. I mean, I have to do a bunch of things, right? But the things that I could never do on my own would be to have an entire university set up to, educate young people, to,
Mm,
develop research and ideas that change the world. Like I couldn't do that by myself. And
yeah,
yet I get to be a part of an organization much larger than me that
yeah.
does
That
these things.
does
And
that. Yeah.
I can feel happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. This is bringing to my mind a big challenge that exists in organizations around performance management and ratings and things
Mm,
like that, because I think that breeds a lot of competition. I've been, let's say, behind the curtain on those conversations
mm.
where we're essentially pitting people against each other, and it's a very subjective conversation where managers are arguing on behalf of people in their team, either for or against. Um, any thoughts on how that might shape how people show up at work?
Yes. Well, thought number one is that most of those conversations are not as high quality as they could be, right? And
That's
by
so
that I
true. Yeah.
mean, as you said subjective and
Yeah.
sort of, a little competitive and not, but so let's go with subjective first, which is, of course, we all have subjective views. That's just a fact.
Mm,
But what we do to overcome our subjectivity and have higher quality conversations is um, we try to connect our subjective views, assessments, conclusions to what Chris Argyris called directly observable data, right? We try to, the discipline is what's the evidence, right? If I say so and so is a great performer, I could just say that and expect everyone to take my word for it.
yeah.
Or I could say, here are some very specific things I saw this person do to help others develop their skills, to solve a really tough customer problem, to, you name it, but make it concrete so that we can together look at it and go, yeah, you're right. That behavior, that story does tie nicely to the conclusion, very effective employee, right?
Yeah.
And similarly, if I think this person's not so effective, again, I should be able to, and Chris Argyris called this walk down the ladder of inference, right? Instead of just sharing my conclusion, which is what most people share in most of those conversations,
Yeah.
I should share my data. I should share my evidence. And the problem is most people they don't do a good job of retaining the evidence in their minds. They just retain their impressions and
Yes.
conclusions. So
Mm,
we have to all discipline ourselves to get um, more scientific about it,
yeah.
more able to show the evidence or illustrations of the conclusions that we're reaching.
Mm,
And by showing them, I'm I'm then engaging in a learning process with you because you might say, well, I'd say I see the same story happening and I label it differently.
yes.
Here's that person taking control, not
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? So then we get to have a conversation where we're learning from each other
Mm,
and coming to a higher quality conclusion together than either of us could have done alone.
yeah. And to me, that would work at that kind of senior meeting level where you're
Right,
discussing
right.
and you're sharing, like you called it, data, but also in the conversations that you're having with team members. So you can
Totally.
share specific examples and illustrate it with, like, this is what I think. Now, obviously those conversations should be happening throughout the year rather than all saved for
You say
the end of year
obviously, but
review.
it's not obvious to many organizations, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. In fact, the biggest problem with the performance management conversations is their infrequency, or
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest problems. But yes, because we really should be having ongoing
Yeah.
cooperative, collaborative conversations about how to keep doing things better. And by the way,
Mm.
if I'm your manager and you're not doing as good a job as I wish, you were, is that your fault or mine? I kind of think it's mine
Mm.
because presumably you're doing what you think you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And I'm the one whose job it is to help you see the gap and so it's my job to I haven't been clear, right? I either haven't
Yeah.
given you the right feedback or I haven't given you the right coaching or haven't clarify, I haven't sort of given you the resources you need to, whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
it's my job, right?
Whereas we tend to label people, I think, don't
Yeah,
we?
yeah. Like
Bad
you're not a good
employee,
performer.
difficult person, underperformer. Yeah.
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 I mean, I'm not saying every single person you hire is always going to end up being capable of being a fabulous performer. But I
Mm.
am saying the first place to look when you're concluding that they aren't is right here, right at yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And then with then you do your hard work and of learning oriented performance conversations and taking mutual responsibility. And if ultimately you can't, the situation doesn't change, then you're allowed to come to the conclusion that maybe this isn't the perfect role for you.
Mm.
But but the first step or idea has to be that it's on you, the manager, because it's your job, not theirs, to
Mm.
manage.
Yeah. 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 So if we're starting from a default position of no or low psychological safety, which I
Mm,
think we are generally,
yes.
but also an assumption that we do have psychological safety. We maybe
Mm.
mistake it for comfort or saying what we want, or we make a mistake about what it actually means. How can we test, for want of a better word, whether we have psychological safety in our teams?
That's a good question. And I'm glad you brought this whole topic up because it is so important that last spring, I wrote an article in HBR with Michaela Karasi called What People Get Wrong About Psychological Safety. And you've just
Mm,
alluded to some of it, but it's that it's about being nice, that it's about being comfortable, or that it's a free for all. Um, and, psychological safety is a sense of permission for candor, but it is an incomplete recipe for learning, right? It allows learning, but it doesn't make it happen. What makes it
mm,
happen is a compelling goal, skills, resources, the, so let's look at skills for a moment, right? Because oftentimes, when people are in that situation where they either think they have psychological safety, but they don't, um, what's really lacking is the skills for, let's say, challenging conversations, right? That
mm,
willingness to take an interpersonal risk. And it's hard to take an interpersonal risk if I just don't know how to say it, right? So we do have to help people. I talked earlier about walking down the ladder of inference. We have to help people with some of the, what I would call learning skills or high quality conversation skills
mm.
that they need to do this well. It's not enough just to know, oh yeah, we have permission. We're supposed to share our knowledge. We're supposed to speak up. Um, it helps to have a little bit of skill in doing that in ways that won't just, make people upset at you.
Yeah.
Right. That you do it in a kind of thoughtful, learning oriented way. So how do you know? I mean, I think for like the first, I'll say this is sort of, it's what we were talking about before, but take some time to think about how much, what's the ratio of bad news to good, of dissent to
Mm,
agreement, of I need
yeah.
help to, hey, all's well, right? And if it's, let's call those like red and green. And if you're not hearing any red, it's probably a sign that the psychological safety is low because there's red everywhere, right? In
Yeah.
an uncertain world. So
Yeah.
so if you're not hearing it, that's that's a warning sign. It's
Yeah.
like
That
the
it's likely
Sherlock
being
Holmes.
shared somewhere else at home
Yeah,
or with their peers,
exactly.
or
It's
but
in
it's just not being shared with
behind
you.
closed doors, but you're not
Yeah.
hearing it. So,
Yeah.
and then the more formal answer is, you can go online and um, fearlessorganization.org .org, I think, maybe it's .com. Anyway, and do a little free survey and then
Great.
get some data and then talk about it. Like just
Yeah.
use that as a trigger for a high quality conversation. But I think where you started was really important with that question because assume it's not there, right?
Yeah.
Because of human beings
Mm,
struggling to say difficult things, right?
mm,
Struggling to ask for help, struggling to dissent, struggling to, you know, share a wacky idea. So just assume it's hard and do what you can to make it easier, meaning ask good questions, call
yeah.
attention to the uncertainty of the work, respond
Yeah.
productively to what people say.
Yeah.
This
I
is hard.
like,
It's learning, right? It's
yeah.
all about learning and continuous learning together.
I love how you phrase that as making it basically what I heard was make it easy for people to do what you want them to do. Like
Yeah,
I'm a big
yeah,
proponent of that. Just
right.
make things really easy for people to do what it is that you want. Another question that I saw, or another comment that I saw during the week, which I thought was quite interesting, was this idea of saying no. So, when we have a lot on our plates and we can't take on anything additional, the default, I think, usually is, or that people teach us to say no or to say no more effectively. If we
Yeah.
feel like we can't say no to additional work, do you think that's a sign of a lack of psychological safety where we
Yeah.
feel like we have to say yes?
Yes, absolutely. And
Mm,
that's one I suspect many of our listeners have experienced.
yes.
And I think the baby step, it's hard to say no, right? But the baby step toward that would be to make, like when you're in a bind, say so. And so
Yeah.
just, if you feel like, on the one hand, I don't feel I can say no, but on the other
Mm,
hand, if I say yes, I'm very likely to do it badly because I don't have capacity. I mean, the one thing
mm,
we really know is finite is time in the day.
yeah.
So just screw up your courage and make the bind itself
Mm,
discussable. Like,
yeah.
oh, everything in me wants to say yes, and yet I can't see my way forward toward doing a really good job on that
Yeah.
unless I find something else to say no to.
Mm. I think that in itself is an interesting reframe that I know I can't do my best work. And
Yeah,
me
right.
personally being someone I like to do things excellently. If I'm doing something, I want to do it really well. So a reframe, like if I know I can't give this my best because I just don't have the capacity right now,
Right.
then it's on me to speak up and talk about what's going on
That's
and
right. And
reshuffle
maybe if
or
it's your manager
reprioritize.
asking you, I mean, it's perfectly fine. In fact, it's probably good practice to say, um, maybe you could help me prioritize. I mean, maybe there are things that I'm doing that are keeping me busy that you actually don't think are that useful. And the last thing you want is to keep doing things that aren't really being read or heard or,
Mm,
you know, aren't seen as adding value. So it's, sometimes if something comes along that seems quite important to whoever is bringing it to your attention, use them to help you say no to something else if it's, if it's not going to be this. But
yeah.
make the bind discussable.
Yeah. What are the biggest things that you see going wrong when there's no psychological safety?
The two big things, and one is more visible than the other. So let me say the less visible one first. Without psychological safety, you will suffer a lack of innovation. Right? So it
Mm,
won't show up as anything in the short term, right? Performance will be fine for the company, the team, whatever in the short term because we're doing our job, right? Um, we're executing. But next year or 5 years from now will be obsolete because we didn't innovate, right? Because
yeah.
psychological safety is necessary for innovation because we have to take risks of trying something that might not work, of suggesting a crazy idea and all the rest. So bucket number one is the lack of innovation that no one will notice until
Mm,
it's kind of too late.
yeah.
And
Can we
bucket,
pause? Can we
yeah,
just
yeah,
pause on
yeah,
that a
yeah, yeah.
second? Because it reminds me of something that you said. I'm sure you said it in Paris, but you also said it in your brilliant book, was this idea that if people are silent, you don't know that they're being
Right.
silent. It's not,
It's an echo
if
of
they,
that. You're right.
yeah, yeah.
If
So
someone's
it's this,
holding back, it doesn't sort of announce itself,
yes,
right? As I'm holding back, got something
yeah,
to say, but I'm not saying it. Like So
Exactly.
silence, holding back is invisible,
Yeah.
whereas speaking up is visible. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, you have to train yourself to know of that asymmetry and then be mighty curious about what's going on in there that's not being shared.
But much like innovation, we don't know that we haven't
Right,
had innovation
right,
until
right.
it's too late.
Until it's too late, exactly. And
Yeah.
it's hard to catch up. And
Yeah.
the other
Bucket
bucket
two.
of,
Yeah.
low psychological safety is the enabling of preventable failures. And so
Mm.
many of the cases, the deep case studies that I've done are of preventable failures. And I call them preventable because they could have been avoided had someone spoken up, right? These are not sort of, out of the blue, something comes over the transom that no one saw coming, right?
Mm.
But the kinds of things where people, smart people, engineers, marketers, whoever they knew this isn't going to fly, but they were
Mm.
afraid to speak up about it. And
Yeah.
then it's only a matter of time before some, very expensive or very reputationally harmful failure happens that is directly attributed to the lack of psychological safety. People had
Mm.
to speak up in a timely way.
Yeah. It's interesting. I use kind of a funny example of this in the book. It's I don't know if you've ever seen the show Silicon Valley. Um,
I've
okay.
heard of it. I have not seen it.
I love it. It's satire,
Oh,
so
good.
for me, it's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
brilliant.
yeah.
But there is that example of no one is willing to speak up to the next level up, and
Yes.
the delay becomes 15 weeks instead of what the CEO originally thought was 2 weeks, and he himself doesn't want to speak up to the board. So it shows
That's
that
right.
it's come from the top.
All
I
the
don't want
way
to be the
up. Right.
person to tell the
Yes.
board. I don't want to be the person to tell the CEO. I don't want to be the
Right.
person to. And
Right.
it trickles down
Crazy. I
exactly.
mean,
It plays out exactly like that.
it's truly crazy, and yet it's been the way of organizations since the beginning of them.
This is it. This is it. Amy, I've so enjoyed our conversation. The question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast: what does being happier at work mean to you?
To me, it's that state of flow. It's the Csikszentmihalyi idea that when we're really in a situation where our skills and the challenge are in a
Mm,
nice balance, right? It's something I'm doing something hard and challenging and engaging, but I'm capable of doing it. So I'm
yeah.
in that flow state.
Mm,
And I think that's what happy is at work, right? There might be
yeah.
happy at home on reading a book, but happy at work is feeling well used
Mm,
for the skills or the experience that I have
yeah.
that I can produce something and almost not notice the passage of time.
Yeah. Love that. And what gets you into that state of flow, and how often do you experience it?
Not often enough,
Yeah.
but I think what gets it is, sometimes a deadline, but not too scary a deadline.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's sort of a deadline that says, okay, stop messing around. It's time to really roll up your sleeves and get to work and pull out the project, pull out the notes, the background, and just take seriously the opportunity to do something that's useful, at least to someone.
Yeah. 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 Love it. It's kind of the impact, almost the impact of the work, that it's going to matter to someone else.
Yes,
Mm,
absolutely. Right. I mean, I
yeah.
think it's true. There are things you can do just for fun for yourself, but I think that flow state and that at work is about believing. I think it helps to believe that what you're doing might matter
Yeah,
to
that it's
to
and it's
others.
in service
Yeah,
to other
right.
people. Brilliant. I
Exactly.
love that.
Exactly.
And if people want to find out more about you and your work, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, I suppose LinkedIn is a good place to go at Amy C. Edmondson.
Brilliant. Love that. I've so enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I think we explored lots of areas that I haven't heard you talking about before, I hope.
I think so
And
too.
yes, we took it in a few different directions than I was expecting. So I've really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.